So do men and women need to train differently in the gym? That is the question we are going to answer in this video. And the answer is yes and no, because a lot of the main principles of training apply to both men and women exactly the same. But men and women are, of course, biologically different, and so there are things that you definitely want to know about and be thinking about when it comes to training in the gym if you're a man compared to a woman. So let's dive into this and start off talking about the similarities, the things that both men and women should do the same. And that starts with lifting weights and lifting heavy weights. Now I want to get right into this and bust this myth of the idea that as a woman, if you start lifting heavy weights, you are going to get bulky and suddenly turn into the Hulk. That's just not how it works. It's not how resistance training and building muscle works, and it's not how the female body works. Because I would hate to think that there are women out there who are wanting to get in better shape and are aspiring to a certain body that actually requires them to lift weights and lift heavy weights, but they're hesitant to do it because they're worried they're going to get bulky. That's not going to happen. So that's the first thing. And on the other end of that, I will quickly say, for men, you need to put your ego aside and don't make the mistake of lifting weights that are too heavy, that are going to negatively affect your form and your ability to do the exercise properly for the sake of trying to lift heavier. Now let's dive into some of the main principles of resistance training and building muscle that applies to both men and women and anyone who is wanting to build muscle in the gym. And that is firstly focusing on progressive overload. Now, what does that mean? Progressive overload is essentially progressing on the exercises that you're doing. That could be increasing the amount of weight or the amount of reps that you do on an exercise. Because at the end of the day, if you're not increasing the weight or the reps, you are not going to be challenging your body and therefore forcing it to adapt to the new weight you are doing. And if it doesn't need to adapt, it won't, and therefore your muscles are not going to grow. So progressive overload is essential for muscle growth. If you're not focusing on that, your muscles aren't going to grow. And so one of the really important things that you need to be doing is tracking your lifts, because if you're not keeping track of how much weight you're doing, how many reps you're doing on each exercise, you're not going to be able to consistently, week by week and month by month, progress on those lifts if you don't know where you are with them. So that is probably my number one really important tip, is focusing on progressive overload and tracking your lifts, writing down how much you're lifting and for how many reps. And the next thing is, that goes for men and women, is you want to be focusing on a combination of compound exercises and isolation exercises. Compound exercises are generally big, heavy exercises that incorporate lots of different muscles in the body. So squats, for example, are a compound exercise because they hit your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes. They'll also engage your core. They target lots of the body. Same with a pull-up, for example, is targeting your whole back and your biceps. And for both men and women, you want plenty of compound exercises in your training, and I would suggest having them at the start of your workouts so you can do those heavier exercises that are more taxing and are harder work at the beginning of the exercise when you're feeling fresher. And then you also want some isolation exercises, which are exercises that isolate a specific muscle. So a bicep curl isolates your bicep. A lateral raise targets your delt, your shoulder. And you definitely also want those things in your training, but programming them later in your workouts is a good idea. And isolation exercises are also great because you can make them very specific to your goals and the muscles that you really want to target and you want to work on. So if you're wanting to build your glutes more, isolation exercises like glute kickbacks or hip abductors are great exercises that really isolate the glute. But if you are wanting to focus on building your bicep, you're going to be wanting to do different variations of bicep curls. And then if we come on to, I guess, the third key foundation of effective resistance training that applies for both men and women, is just making sure that your form is correct and you're doing the exercises properly. Because if you're not going to be making the gains and the muscle growth that you could be. And so, as I mentioned earlier, going too heavy is definitely a mistake some people make that stop you from doing the exercise properly. And one big tip for making sure you're doing the exercise right and you are getting the maximum amount of muscle growth out of the exercises is focusing on the eccentric part of the movement and the stretch part of the movement. Now, the eccentric part of the movement is the part of the movement where you are lowering the weight. That is actually the part of the movement that's going to result in the most muscle growth. So really slowing down that part of the movement and focusing on it is really important. And then also the stretch part of the movement. For example, if you were doing a chest press, when your arms and your hands are back here and your chest is being stretched with the weight still there, that is going to be stretching your pecs, which is also going to result in the most muscle growth, because you're really going to be tearing those muscle fibers. So that is a really quick overview of some of the really important things that you want to be focusing on and thinking about when it comes to your resistance training. That applies to everyone. And now let's dive into some of the nuances when it comes to training between men and women, because these are really important to know. And I would say for women especially, some of the things I'm going to talk about are really relevant and you should know if you are wanting to get into resistance training. So firstly, let's talk a little bit about recovery, because that is when your muscles actually grow. Your muscles don't grow in the gym, they grow when you are recovering. And so men and women are, of course, biologically very different. Men have higher levels of testosterone, whereas women have higher levels of estrogen and progesterone. And this is why men will be able to probably build more muscle faster, and women won't be able to build as much muscle as quickly. This is why I talked about the fact that you are not going to pick up some weights as a woman and turn into the Hulk, because your biology means that you are not going to be able to build 40-inch arms. So that's the first thing. Hormones is a big part of this, and I'll dive more into that in a minute. But this also affects recovery times. Women are generally better at endurance, which means generally in a gym, women can have slightly shorter rest periods between their sets when they're doing exercises, and they can get away with that. And actually that is going to work well for them and is going to result in lots of muscle gain. Whereas men probably want a slightly longer rest period between their sets. So whereas a woman might only have a minute to a minute and a half between a heavy set, a man might need 2 to 3 minutes. So that's the first thing. The second thing is women do recover slightly quicker than men, which means women can actually probably do more volume than men can do. And what that means is you can actually do more sets, do more exercises in your workouts for the week than a man can. So whereas a man might want to stick to 10 to 20 sets per muscle group. Slightly depends on the muscle group and the individual, but that's like a vague idea. A woman might be 15 to 25. So as a woman, you just are able to do that bit more volume because you recover faster. And then another thing is, of course, your biology means that your muscle distribution and where your body tends to store more muscle and where you're likely to be able to easily build more muscle is different in men. Generally, women will be able to build more muscle more easily in their lower body, in their legs, their glutes, whereas men have more of an advantage when it comes to their upper body, which is where they tend to hold and be able to grow a lot of muscle. So that is another difference. And then of course, just actual strength. Men are going to be naturally stronger than women on most lifts. That's again, just biology. But as I said earlier, men do not recover as fast. So as a man, you will probably fatigue slightly faster and will probably need slightly more recovery. And I'm now going to probably come on to the biggest difference between men and women when it comes to their training. And this is really important for women to know. Your cycle has a massive effect on your strength and your energy and your performance in the gym. And depending on where you are in your cycle, it's going to affect your gym performance. And that is okay. And that is something that you should learn and know so that you can tailor your working out to that. So around the first 2 weeks of a woman's cycle is called the follicular phase. And this phase is great for training because your estrogen rises, which is great for your strength, your energy, and your endurance and performance in the gym. So those first 2 weeks is a great time to be focusing on lifting heavy, pushing yourself, and trying to really focus on that progressive overload and increasing the weight you're lifting. And then after about 2 weeks, around day 14, you will be ovulating, and that's when you're at your peak strength, because that is when your testosterone during your cycle peaks, which means your strength, your energy is going to be at its highest. That's when you'll be able to smash your PRs, your personal records in the gym and on your lifts. And that is the peak time for training. Then we come into the luteal phase, which is maybe sort of 10 days to 2 weeks. That is when progesterone rises, and that is going to mean that your strength and your energy and your performance in the gym probably is going to dip slightly. And that is okay, but it's important that you're aware of that and you know that. So that week before the end of the cycle, before you're menstruating, is a good week to probably lower the weight slightly on the exercises that you're doing and just be kind to your body and don't overdo it, because your hormones are playing a massive role in, as I said, your energy, your mood, and your performance in the gym. And so you don't want to be pushing yourself at that period in the cycle or period in the month. And that's a really good way for you to structure your workouts. You do around 3 weeks of pushing yourself, trying to increase your strength, increase your lifts, and hitting PRs. Then you have a week where you lower the weight slightly, you're maybe doing slightly less volume and you're kind to your body, and then you pick it up again and progress from there. And that actually ends up working as a bit of a mesocycle where you've got 3 weeks of pushing, 1 week as a deload week, and then you repeat the process. So women obviously have their around 28-day cycle, and men have a 24-hour cycle, so that's not as relevant for men. Men don't generally have periods of the month where they'll be less strong and then more strong and have less energy and then more energy. However, I would say, not that you need to be doing it every 4 weeks, but as a man, taking weeks here and there where you lower the weight slightly and you do a deload week where you're just allowing your body to have some extra recovery and just regain your energy and your strength in the gym is no bad thing. And then let's finally come on to the last thing that I want to talk about in this video when it comes to differences between men and women. And this isn't really differences between men and women, this is differences between individuals. Obviously, based on your goals and what you are wanting to achieve in the gym, you are going to want to have a different program. And so as a man, if you are wanting to focus on building your upper body more and you want to build your legs, but they're not the main priority, then you're probably going to have more exercises or more workouts in the week that are focused on that. The other way, if you are a woman and you are wanting to focus more on leg training and building your glutes and your legs and you're not as focused as your upper body, switch the other way around. And I just want to say that is not exclusive to men and women. It can be the other way around. As a man, if you're wanting to focus on building your legs and your glutes, focus on that. And vice versa, if you're a woman and actually you want to focus on the upper body, that's awesome too. But at the end of the day, it is down to the individual's goals. And then based on your goals, it is going to massively affect the exercise selection that you are doing in the gym. But other than that, all those protocols I talked about at the beginning of this video are relevant to you and they go across the board for everyone. So I really hope this video has been insightful for you, for both men and women, and you now see some of the differences that you need to be thinking about when it comes to your training, but then also all of the similarities and all the things that both men and women should be doing. And I hope from watching this video you see that, bar a few things here and there, men and women should be training really in a very similar way. So thank you for watching this video. If you found this video helpful or interesting, then please do like it. And please do subscribe if you want to see more videos on losing fat, building muscle, and transforming your body and getting in great shape. Thank you for watching the video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.